What's going on, everybody? It is Anthony from #BetheChange. We've got an episode of Changemakers tonight. Always one of my favorite things to do. Over the years, we have had amazing names. We've had Daryl Davis. We've had American Ninja Warriors. We have had people creating change in their communities, small and large. And the whole concept behind it is that we're imperfect. We as people have things that we go through, and that ability to go through it and come out the other end in a positive light allows us to create change in others. Terrence Leffridge has been on some of our motivational shows before. He talks about ripple effects a lot. And fact is, a show like this and the people that we bring on are that ripple effect. It's like dropping just a little drop of positivity that can create waves and bigger waves and bigger waves, so that eventually it'll inspire one person here, 3 people there, 10 people, and then inspire a bunch of people to create the change they need in their lives. Fortunately, there's a lot of people looking to create change. And then unfortunately, there's a lot of people that just aren't ready for it. So hopefully we touch the right people at the right time. I encourage you guys, start sharing this episode out there. Again, this is Changemakers. This isn't the political stuff. We don't talk about politics on here. We talk about how to create positivity, how to create change. And we have great guests on here that have done that in their own life. So without further ado, I'm very excited. On this episode, we have got Brian Cuban, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Cuban's little brother, and also a very, very interesting man in his own right, attorney, author, mental health awareness and recovery advocate. He's an author of best-selling book, The Addicted Lawyer, Tales of the Bar, Booze, Blow, and Redemption. His debut thriller novel is coming up, The Ambulance Chaser. So we're going to introduce him in just a sec. But for now, I need your guys' help. I need you to hit the share button. I need you to hit the like button like Rose just said right there. Go ahead and share this out. Let's go ahead and get started with Changemakers. Again, ladies and gentlemen, for this episode, we got Brian Cuban, attorney, author, mental health awareness and recovery advocate, best-selling author as well. He's got a new book coming out in like 7 days, The Ambulance Chaser. It's set for release again December 7th. He's spoken all over the country, nonprofit events, colleges, universities across the United States, writes extensively on subjects in terms of recovery, in terms of addiction, and he is an open book when you speak to him. So we're very excited. Ladies and gentlemen, while you're at home, give a round of applause for Mr. Brian Cuban.
Hey, Anthony, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great.
You have a weird elf on the shelf on the other, over your shoulder.
Yes, this is a vintage Mark Cuban talking doll. Unfortunately, this one is broken, so he won't talk for you, but he says stuff like "you're an idiot, ref," and all kinds of things.
On the upside, he can't get fined if he's a doll.
So that's right. That's right.
If he's a doll that's not working, I should say.
Fall off the shelf, maybe. Brian, he says all kinds of profane things.
That's true. So how old is that? Is that back?
I think that's from 2007.
So right after the championship run, or the almost, Okay, that makes sense. I love it. So Brian, you have a great story. We're going to get into it. Obviously, one of the reasons we have you on is you've got a book coming up called the Ambulance Chaser. So I want you to tell a little bit about that. I've got a link in the chat for people if they want to check it out. It's a pre-release, but go ahead and talk a little bit about that book.
Check it out. As you might expect from the title, it's about a plaintiff's lawyer who is accused of the murder of a high school classmate 30 years prior after her remains are discovered in a vacant lot. He's arrested, charged with her murder, and flees, becoming a fugitive to find the one person who can prove his innocence and save his abducted son.
Interesting stuff. And again, we're going to get into all that you have gone through in terms of your own eating disorders and things that aren't necessarily always talked about as guys, as men. Like we don't talk about our issues with our body. It's just something that's sometimes kept away. But you also were an attorney. You went through a lot of issues with drug use, et cetera. And this is your first fiction book and novel. So you're writing, obviously, using some personal experience, but also creating a little bit of extraordinary as well.
Sure. I mean, there's a saying, write what you know. And I don't think I'm the first novelist to do that.
Yeah.
The protagonist, Jason, in The Ambulance Chaser, struggles with cocaine and alcohol just as I did. His father struggles with dementia just as my father did. But I've never been accused of murder. And the vast majority of the book is more what if than based on my life. But it carries, I mean, people you meet along the way in fiction just either consciously or subconsciously tend to find their way into your characters.
So this book, so you went from obviously the nonfictions. You had Shattered Image, The Addicted Lawyer. The Addicted Lawyer was your memoirs of your life. What made you all of a sudden go, all right, I want to write something a little bit more. I sounds weird to say fun, but a little bit more extraordinary.
It was actually started with a reoccurring dream I had years ago. And this is dark, but this is how it started.
Have at it.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, and it's me and my childhood best friend standing in front of throwing bodies into a bonfire,
Okay.
and watching them burn with their eyes are open, watching us. And then the dream fast forwards to adulthood, and I'm all freaked out that the body's going to be discovered, and wondering why I haven't been arrested, and just this ominous feeling that I would wake up with. And I was out for a jog, and I trying to figure out what this dream means, right? And so you have it, you wake up disoriented, and oh man, and it just occurred to me, well, okay, there's some characters, there's a plot here. I'm going to write a novel around this. That's how it started.
Interesting. And how does that relate in terms of? Well, I mean, you had in the book you said there was you were being tried for murder, I guess being, investigated for murder. I mean, those two, because again, you also have your law background. So how did those actually merge together to create kind of this concept?
Well, it was, I didn't want to do the typical courtroom where 3/4 of it is in the courtroom. I wanted it to be where it showed more just the way plaintiff's law really is. And interesting, the pivotal scene takes place in a courtroom, but with Jason as a defendant, not as the lawyer. So, I mean, it was just natural for it all to come together, but I wanted to do it in a slightly different way.
Got it. And Jason, by the way, to those of you, look, Jason Feldman is he's the protagonist of the book.
Jason Feldman, which is my mother's maiden name, Feldman.
That because we talked again. I was wishing you earlier. Happy Hanukkah. It is my mom's maiden name is Savarinsky, so we are the chosen people.
And Jason, there is a Judaism theme in the book. Jason struggles with his faith, so there are many as I did as a younger Brian, and so there are threads of Brian in there, but obviously the core Jason struggles with drugs and alcohol, his inner conflict, which was my struggle, alcohol and cocaine, which was wrapped around the addicted lawyer. And it was quite a struggle, no different than millions of other struggles with addiction, but they left a lot of damage along the way.
Yeah. Well, I put the link again in the side for you guys. If you guys want to click directly on that on your Facebook or YouTube feeds, feel free, of course. Check that out. We're going to talk about it again at the very end of this episode. Brian, I want to get more into your story, and it is a very interesting one. Obviously, everybody knows who Mark Cuban is. A lot of people, especially in the Dallas area, like me, I knew who you were and knew your backstory. The more I've researched you in the last few days, knowing that you were going to be on, the more interested I was. The important part about this show is seeing people that have gone through struggle and how they can actually help people go through the same struggles and fight the same demons. So take us through all the different things you went through and how your addiction started.
Sure. Well, let's just go through the Reader's Digest chronology. At 18 years old, as a freshman at Penn State University, I was suffering from bulimia and also exercise bulimia, which is obsessive compulsive exercise for the primary purpose of offsetting calories. And the traditional bulimia was obviously binging and purging. Into my early 20s, I was a full-blown alcoholic at Penn State. At 26, I was addicted to cocaine, substance use disorder. By 44 was my first of 2 trips to a psychiatric hospital after a near suicide attempt jail. I've been to jail. I was arrested. 3 failed marriages. 1 more, I get a free set of steak knives, all failing because of drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And then finally, my recovery journey began in 2007.
So how much older is Mark than you?
So he was born in 58 and I'm 61. So just around 3 years.
3 years?
Maybe 2 years, 6 months.
So I know he moved out to Dallas. I remember I had friends that lived at the Villages apartments when he started his beginning of his tech career.
Didn't everyone live in the Village?
Yeah, I think everybody lived in the. I'm not gonna lie, I knew a bunch of people lived out there, but yeah,
I lived in the Village.
It was years after Mark and you. But was there, growing up, was there any sibling rivalry that kind of set this off?
No, not really. Here, there are 3 of us. Mark's the oldest. I'm the middle. We have a younger brother, Jeff.
Got it.
Mark is the firstborn, as you might expect. He was very outgoing, kind of following the Dr. Spock or whatever it is, where the kids are.
Yeah.
Outgoing, selling this door to door, selling that door to door. As a teenager, he and his buddies, barely old enough to drive, when the Pittsburgh Press and Post Gazette weren't able to be published because of a printer strike. They drove out to Cleveland, about 200 miles away, bought the Cleveland Plain dealer, drove them back to downtown Pittsburgh, and sold them on a street corner for twice what they paid for them. So you kind of knew what he was going to be.
Yeah.
My younger brother, Jeff, was a nationally ranked wrestler, a jock, good-looking kid, the beer parties, the prom, the girlfriends, very popular, all the things. And I was and they were all the things I associated with love and acceptance and popularity.
Yeah.
I mean, I was classic middle child syndrome. I was shy. I was withdrawn. And I internalized anything said negative about me and wore it as kind of who I was, like a skin-tight suit. So we were very different.
Yeah.
I was a heavy kid, trending on obese. And unfortunately, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my relationship with my mom, but I want to make it clear to everyone watching your show that I don't blame my mother at all for the things I went through. Parents don't cause eating disorders. Parents don't cause addiction. There's a difference between cause and correlation, right? Some things that happen in the home can correlate with mental health issues later in life, but it won't impact some other kids.
Yeah.
So I don't blame my parents for anything.
Right.
There was a lot of fat shaming. My mom, I used to come home from school and I would eat Chef Boyardee ravioli out of the can, the old style can opener.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And I'd stick a spoon in. This was before we didn't have a microwave, and just eat it cold. And my mom came home. She sold real estate, and she would see me and say, "Brian, if you keep eating that way, you're going to be a fat pig." Now, these were the things my mother's mother said to her.
Yeah.
These were the things my great grandmother probably said to my grandmother. I came from an Eastern European Jewish family from the old country. They all came over through Ellis Island.
My mom said the same stuff to me, so I get it.
Yeah, the stereotypical Jewish mother and
Yeah.
Jewish grandmother.
Yeah.
Food, eat. And my mother also had a very verbally and mentally abusive relationship with her bipolar mother.
Got it.
And so it kind of runs downhill, right? This is the early to mid 70s when a young mother couldn't talk about having mental health issues, where you could get put in an asylum by your husband.
Right. Yeah.
And so you didn't talk about these things, but not understanding that, I grew, it hurt to hear those things. And I was also being bullied at school and fat shamed. And I began eating more Chef Boyardee ravioli and more Chef Boyardee ravioli. And I became a bigger Brian and a bigger Brian. And Anthony, as so often happens when kids change for what other kids perceive in the negative at school, the bullying started. The
100%.
bullying grew more intense. Brian, you're a fat pig. Well, you must talk to my mom. Brian, go to Sears and get it back when Sears was huge and get a bra for your man boobs. And I developed a very self-deprecating sense of humor and became the sad clown.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want these kids to know how badly these words hurt me. Because you have to remember, this was the baby boomer era.
Right.
The era when when 2 cups attached to a string were a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
When social networking was playing dodgeball on the basketball blacktop. Back when going viral meant 15 kids in the lunchroom knew you had a crush on the girl.
Right.
A very different time. And
I miss it a little bit.
These kids who were the bullies were, in my mind, the popular kids, like my brother, the prom king, the prom queen. So I wanted to be part of that so bad and be accepted that I self-deprecated and sort of just hung around on the outside, hoping that one day, like a fraternity hazing, somebody'd wrap his arm around me and say, "You're one of us now, kid."
Right.
That's not how bullying works, right?
Waiting to get called up. Yeah.
That's not how bullying, waiting to get called up to the majors for the after-school party.
Yeah.
After the football game and all the things I wanted so badly to be invited to, but never asked. Yeah. And so this all culminated, and when we want to talk about trauma and how trauma impacts lives, this all culminated in what I call the day of the gold pants. And this is important because this is kind of the core of the trauma in my life. My brother Mark used to teach disco, believe it or not. This is the era of Saturday Night Fever, if you've seen it, John Travolta. And he had this pair of shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants.
Yes, he did.
And he gave them to me because I guess he bought a new pair to teach his disco and to go to Club 21 or wherever he went back then in Pittsburgh. And these pants, I love my brother, and I was so proud he gave me these pants. But these pants fit Mark okay. He wasn't a big guy. I had to jump up and down, spray the water bottle. My butt looked like 15 cats trying to get out. But I didn't care, and I wore those pants to school. The kids made fun of them. And I'm walking home with these kids one day. There was 3 or 4 guys. Again, popular kids, but kind of bullyish kids. And they're making fun of my shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants. They start pulling at them, Anthony. The next thing I know, they start tearing at them. The next thing I know, they have physically assaulted me. They tore them into shreds, threw them out in the busy street, down to my Fruit of the Loom tighty whities, my Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirt, my Keds tennis shoes, and my tube socks. The 70s tube socks with the 3 colors. Remember those?
Of course.
You're young, but we had them.
We had them in the 80s. You're good. I got you.
They went on high-fiving each other like they had done the funniest thing ever. I went out in the street, picked up the shreds, covered up my tighty whities, and waddled home along this busy street. People gawked. No one stopped. I got home, and I was the only one home. The house was funeral quiet. I walked down to our basement, down these wooden stairs. And in Texas, you talk about basements, they think you're from Mars. Yeah. Everyone in the East knows we have basements. You go downstairs. And every time these old wooden stairs creaked in our house that my mom still lives in, I felt the creak echoed through the world. Mm-hmm. A groan of the wood echoed through the house and the high school and the bullies, and they all knew my shame. My brothers could hear it wherever they were, my mom, my dad. And I got to the bottom, and I stuffed those shreds at the bottom of a wastebasket, hoping that would hide my shame. And I never told anyone about it, but that's not how trauma works. Trauma remembers, trauma threads, and trauma can impact our lives in so many ways. That event was so traumatic to me, and you combine that with the bullying, that I could go to that spot in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and show you exactly where it happened decades later. That is kind of where it all started: the bullying, the fat shaming, and the teasing with a very docile and very shy personality, and everything kind of came together to create the perfect storm for a mess moving forward.
How old were you when that happened?
I was about 14 or 15 when that happened.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, so I know about basements, even though I'm in Texas now, and it was an interesting situation. And people assume bullies are bullies that steal your lunch money and all these different things, and that's the movies portray one side of bullies. There's bullies that are psychological. I was the poorest, one of the top 5 poorest white kids in my wealthy school in St. Louis, Missouri, Chesterfield, Missouri. And there was a lot of psychological stuff we would go through I would go through day after day. And honestly, like you, I was outgoing and had my set of friends, but I definitely was not popular. But it's interesting you brought up self-deprecating humor. I am known for my self-deprecating humor. So it's interesting to hear you say that, because it really does become part of this defense mechanism that, although entertaining other people, it comes from a probably much darker place.
Well, sure. And you talk about the psychological aspects of it. It came full circle because my freshman year at Penn State, there were 4 of us in a dorm. I bullied one of my roommates mercilessly, just absolutely mercilessly, because I thought that would gain me acceptance from the other kids. And it got so bad, Anthony, his brother, we called him Hawaiian Dan. And I've talked because he wore these he was from San Diego, but he wore these flowery Hawaiian type shirts. And I actually, in my first book, I apologized to him, and I hope someday serendipity brings it where I can see him and tell him how sorry I am, because it's haunted me my entire life. His brother came to school and threatened to beat the freaking shit out of me if I didn't
You
leave
can
his
say it.
brother
You,
alone.
you can say
Beat
it.
the freaking shit out of him, and I never bothered him again. So it came around, and I came to understand what I had done. I was repeating cycles, or I was looking for acceptance the wrong ways. The desire for acceptance can be as powerful as a line of cocaine in
Oh,
how it uh,
I feed off of it. My girlfriend is much quieter. I mean, she's not. She is she doesn't need the attention of a large amounts of people. I've been an MC. I've been in front of crowds and crowds and crowds. I've hosted spring break. I've hosted major events for the NCAA championships. I've done all these different things. And there is this, to me, I've actually never done a hard drug,
yeah.
but there is something addictive to a certain feeling, and that desirability and people's eyes on you. It's fascinating because it really does. It creates a high that some people don't understand. She doesn't understand how it makes me feel. So I completely get that.
And so the cycle had started, the cycle of destruction. And before I knew it, and it was very instinctive because this is before anyone was talking about eating disorders.
Right.
This is 1979 going into 80. Karen Carpenter, the beautiful singer, would pass away from complications related to anorexia,
Yeah.
not for 3 more years in 1983.
Yeah.
So no one was talking about this. And I began binging and purging. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it was. But here's what I did know, Anthony. Every time I binged and purged, I felt like the world was going to be okay. The next day, those bullies would like me. The next day, girls would like me. The next day, I'd be accepted. But after that few moments of peace in my gut went away, in swept the shame of engaging in an act that I had no idea why I was doing it. I didn't have a name for it. But I knew that guys didn't stick their fingers down their throat. And that was just, it's shameful, but I didn't know why it was shameful.
Yeah.
It's just not a manly thing to do. But I had to have that 15 or 20 seconds of peace again and again, the life of a bulimic. And that transitioned quickly into alcohol abuse. By my sophomore year at Penn State, I was a full-blown quote unquote alcoholic. And I put alcoholic in air quotes because it's a label, not a diagnosis.
Right. And I want to, because I mean, I've seen you talk about that in other instances. College, what distinguishes a college alcoholic? Because kids drink. Like, I mean, I drank in college. I never would consider myself an
Well,
alcoholic, but
that's a
there are
great
some
question.
heavy drinkers. What's the difference between a college alcoholic and a partier?
That's a great question. And here's the difference, I would say. I walked into a hamburger joint at Penn State one night, drunk, of course, and I came across this pamphlet, rack of pamphlets called the 20 Questions that the 12-step groups put out. I don't know if they still do. And the most well-known 12-step group is AA, but there are others. So in those 20 questions, it said, and it was geared towards college students. Do you black out? Do you miss class? Do you go to class drunk? Are you drinking alone? And I'm checking off yes to all these questions. That's what distinguishes.
That makes sense. And I think the drinking alone, out of the things you brought up, that last one is very important because there's social settings all the time. And I do remember a couple friends in college where I'd get, I'd call them up and they'd be like, yeah, I just whacked off a 6-pack. And I'm like, who are you with? I'm just chilling, watching. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, what I would do is when I turned 21 in Pennsylvania, we have state stores. The state controls the liquor industry. Yep. I would go into a state store and I would buy one of those little things of tequila, and I would put it in my sock, and I would go to the alleys. In Penn State, they have this alley along College Avenue where all the bars are along this alley. And I would drink in the alley, and I would chug the tequila just to get drunk so I could walk into a bar already drunk and in the hope that I may be outgoing and meet a girl. And all I would end up doing is getting depressed and sticking my finger down my throat afterwards in the alley again.
Crazy. And again,
it was awful.
It's things that men don't talk about. And I noticed somebody's comment on the side, like saying that they wanted their husband to watch Jeanette, who's always watches a lot of our stuff. And it's interesting because we're in a place in this country where we probably overdo that concept. I would say definitely overdo the concept of toxic masculinity and all these things. And there is something, men need to be tough. I get that. But we also need to talk about emotions, and we need to talk
Uh,
about what we're going through. And we still don't do it enough.
well, I mean, men, our society has evolved that it's weakness to be vulnerable, and to allow yourself to be vulnerable, and vulnerability is the linchpin to mental health, right? Allowing
Yeah.
in a safe space, wherever you consider a safe space, is to talk about what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And that's tough, and especially tough in the legal profession. We don't do that.
Yeah.
Law school, we go to law school to take advantage of vulnerability, not to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. But back at Penn State, I was also got into long distance running. I was running 10 miles a day and 20 miles a day. Well, I'm also binging and purging and drinking. It put a lot of stress on
Healthy.
my body,
Yeah.
because the only time I felt good, the only time I felt okay, was when I was out on a 20-mile run, because I was alone. No one was going to fat shame me. No one was, even though at that point I was down in the 170s of weight.
How
But
tall are
still,
you?
huh?
How tall are you?
But that was from a high of 260
Wow.
in high school.
Okay.
And so, but every time I looked in the mirror, Anthony, I still saw this fat pig. And I'm cycling through all these behaviors to try to change that fat pig in the mirror, but it never changed. And so I remember I was felt so alone at Penn State, and it was a miserable experience. I won't lie, my 4 years there. I was during the Penn State Nittany Lion games. You would have hundreds of thousands of people walking, 100,000 people walking to the stadium and
Happy Valley.
laughing with each other, holding hands with their girlfriends, and it would make me physically ill to see that, because I had none of that. And so I would go on these long runs until the game was over.
Interesting.
So,
I started running, God, about 23, 24. I got into marathon running. It's funny, we have a lot of parallels. And I felt the most, and for a slightly different reason, I felt the most alive when I was running. I wanted to write a book in my 20s called something with the concept of all my major decisions were made while running. They
yeah.
really were, because you have a clarity of thought, and that's kind of in a different way of what you're going through. When you're gone, you were away from people, but you had a clarity of thought and a different level of self-confidence.
And
Yours
it's,
was a little unhealthy,
yeah,
but
and it's one of the few times I felt in control of my life. And I've run 8 marathons, so, but they weren't for healthy reasons, right? But
yeah.
it was the only time I felt in control of my life, when I felt I was achieving. And you're right about it. Now I run with now I've paid the price with an artificial hip, and I kind of limp. When I
Yeah.
go out for a run, turtles pass me. But I have some of my good thoughts out for a run.
Well,
But
now I gotta ask, I know that they weren't necessarily healthy. What was but some of them, I'm sure they're enjoyable. I love marathon running. It's been a few years, but what was your favorite marathon that you ran?
the Marine Corps, and it was also my PR at 3:26.
Virginia. Oh, we have a lot of parallels. So
Yeah.
I've done, I always used to say I've done 8, but it might be 7. I actually almost had a sponsorship thing with you're talking about Virginia, right? The
DC.
DC. Okay, for
Yeah, it
that
ends
marathon,
up
but I
being Iwo
never
Jima
ran that
Monument.
one. But my PR is I want to say 3:30 something, 3:32, because I always wanted to qualify for Boston. I never made it down there.
Yeah, well, I didn't either. But
Yeah.
the last one I ran was New York City many years ago. And then when I was training, I just started getting injured every time I trained. Then I had my hip replaced, and so now
my
I just kind of limp along.
I'm gonna give you a funny story. My second to last marathon that I ran was New York City. I didn't I was this is real. So I was a month into training for Dallas Marathon, which might add was my least favorite marathon of all time. It was a snooze fest. It was hard to run.
Ran it twice.
Oh gosh, it's like I've never ran a marathon where you see a mile marker that's 5 miles away and you're just running parallel with people. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever. It was poorly tracked. But anyways, before that, I ran New York because I was at an event. I was at a conference in New York City, and I saw them setting up for the marathon. And there was a guy across from me at my table saying he had to leave the country for a wedding. Does anybody want his bib number? And obviously, people wait years and years and years. I didn't know his name at the time right away. And it was 4 days away, 5 days away. It was Halloween weekend coming up. And I go, yeah, you know what? I can just barely make it. I go, I'll take it. I'll take the number. So turns out his name was Anthony. So that was fitting. I had Anthony on all my information. Unfortunately, his last name was Johnson. My name's Russo. Close enough. I know that in order for me to make my flight, I have to run a 4 hour. And it was the year, it was about 5 or 6 years ago. Super windy, freezing cold, 37-degree start. He had the last starting time. And I managed to take some great photos, ran it in 4:06, kept running towards I think it was the first year of Uber, one of the early years of Uber, had a backup phone on me, got to the Uber, got then, and this is again not fully trained. This is a month into training. And then got my car, ended up at the airport, still running with my bags to check in 47 minutes before my flight, and I made it. That to me is one of my most epic
Yeah.
Anthony moments.
San Francisco was also a nice marathon. I ran the San Francisco Marathon and had a
Is
nice
it hilly?
No, not hilly at all.
Really?
They don't do the hills.
They do right around it. I love San Francisco.
Cycling back, I mean, so yeah, my 4 years at Penn State were really alcohol infused, and I was a criminal justice major. I wanted to be a police officer. That would have worked out well. I'd have been the first guy in the evidence room trading out the baby laxative for the blow. I managed to do okay grades wise because I had the ability to just study all night, pull it together, and give back the information the next day. And so I'm sitting in the place, I'm looking at cop jobs, and there are two guys talking about taking the law school admission test. And I start listening to them, and I had never thought about being a lawyer. I don't know any lawyers. All I cared about was, the running, the drinking, avoiding people, and all these destructive things. And here I wanted to be a police officer, right?
Right.
So the bells start going off in my head as I listen to them. Not the bells of, oh, yeah, I want to be a lawyer. Not the bells of, I want to be Clarence Darrow or emulate Atticus Finch and change the world. The bells of, law school's 3 years. I can stay in school 3 more years and I can binge and purge. I can drink. I can run. And I can engage in the exact same survival behaviors that got me through Penn State, because I didn't want to look 3 years in advance. I was surviving second to second. I couldn't even see the tip of my nose. And for those reasons, it made perfect sense for me to go to law school.
Huh.
So I walked through the doors of Pitt Law as an alcoholic, dealing with bulimia, 2 types of bulimia, the exercise and the traditional. Now starting to experience major depressive episodes. Not quite the resume for a law review.
Have you already had have you had any girlfriends at this point? Had you had any of the life that you wanted?
I didn't go on my first. I didn't go on my first date until I moved to Dallas. Never had a girlfriend.
No kidding.
Until 1986.
Wow. So you get through all that, but when did you actually? You were binging, purging, drinking, etc. When did you start with the illicit drug use?
Well, I moved to Dallas Labor Day 1986 after I graduated law school. Mark picked me up at the Greyhound bus station downtown, and I moved in with him. And it was like throwing gasoline on a fire, because this was, he's in his 30s, early 30s, and my younger brother's in his 20s, and they're going out drinking. They weren't doing drugs, but they're drinking. I fit right in.
Yeah. And
then in the summer of 1987, in a club called Bone Ash in the Crescent Hotel in Dallas, Texas,
I know it.
In the downstairs, I discovered finally the one thing that for the first time in my 26 years allowed me to finally look in the mirror and love myself. I had hated myself my entire life. I did my first line of cocaine and instantly loved myself. And for the first time, the girls liked me. For the first time, my mother loved me, and she did love me dearly. For the first time, everyone loved Brian. For the first time, even most importantly, Brian loved Brian. Huh. But then it wore off. I'm upstairs in the bar. Hey, what's up? And it wore off, and all of a sudden, Brian hates Brian again. Where's that dealer?
Yeah.
I found the dealer, gave him $100, and it began.
Wow.
Cocaine and alcohol took over my life.
And at that time, when did you start practicing law? Because we're talking 1987.
I failed the Texas bar exam 3 times, all because of drugs and alcohol. But the first time I took the Texas bar exam, my study aids, the weekend before the exam, were review books I borrowed that weekend. That's right. An 8-ball, 3.5 ounces of cocaine, a fifth of Jack Daniel, and a liter of Tab. Those were my study aids for the Texas bar exam in a roadway motel the weekend before the exam.
How'd that end up?
Not well.
No, wouldn't think so.
But it was one of those things like the lottery, right? The envelope comes, and back in those days, they mailed it to you.
Yeah.
And so you're ripping open the envelope, hoping like it's a lottery ticket. You say, I won. No. But and it happened again and again. So it was
So
tough.
in '87, when did your brother start becoming Mark Cuban? When I actually don't know the exact years when he started
He
making.
sold broadcast.com to Yahoo in 1999.
Okay, so he was a .com. It was only .com stuff. So at that time, he was living out in Dallas. You came to join him. What
And
was
he was well known. He was already a millionaire. He was well known. He had his company Micro Solutions,
That's what,
which
okay.
was computer consulting, which he sold to CompuCom for him and his partner, I think $5 million.
And that was it. That was right around then, right?
More Cuban until the broadcast.com thing.
Got it. So Micro Solutions is what I remember. That was in the '80s, though.
Yeah. And I went, and it was funny. He put me to work. I hadn't passed the bar. And he said, you'll come work for me. So I show up my first day at Micro Solutions. And I'm wearing my suit that my dad had bought me for high school that I wore my college graduation. I didn't even go to my law school graduation. And I had this empty briefcase. He looks me up and down. I said, what the hell are you doing? What the fuck are you doing? I said, I'm ready. I'm a lawyer. I'm here to come to work. He shakes his head and said, go home, change into your rattiest jeans and t-shirt, get back here. You are in shipping and receiving. You learn the business like everyone else. There are no lawyers here. There are only people who want to get rich, and get rid of that fucking briefcase.
That's awesome.
That's what he said to me.
That's fitting.
So I did that, and I spent the back boxing up computers and driving around with this great guy, Rex Cummings, and we went to all these companies and installed computers.
Nice.
Something I had no interest in, but it was that's what we did.
Yeah, I mean, there is an allure to Dallas too. I mean, I moved out here obviously well after you, but there is something that if you do Dallas right, and I mean, this may not be, I don't know if this is the case anymore, but I think coming out here, especially from the East Coast, a different part of the country, you come to Texas, people are different, the women are different, the nightlife is different, the jobs feel different here. It's almost like, I don't care what the job is, I'm going to get to the end game, which is fun. So I can see that. In your case, the end game being fun also became dangerous.
Well, there's a saying, cocaine is fun till it's not.
Sounds about right. So you're out in Dallas. You're starting to use drugs. When did you actually start becoming a lawyer? When you passed on your third one?
I passed the bar on the third time, and I became a plaintiff's lawyer. And I say this with a plaintiff's lawyer who was addicted to cocaine and alcohol problems and an alcoholic. And of course, that's a lawyer trope in fiction, right? Started with Paul Newman in The Verdict.
Right.
But so I had become the trope. But I became a plaintiff's lawyer, and I say this with all wonderful deference to the wonderful, great plaintiff lawyers I know. Yeah. I was a classic ambulance chaser. I was taking cases I shouldn't take. I was committing barratry to get cases because I needed as much money as I could to support my drug habit and alcohol habit. Yeah. I had developed a kind of a ring of chiropractors here in Dallas, and this was the era of pagers, and they were out in Mesquite and East and stuff. So I would get a page, and it would just say, "I have a fish," and it would be from one of the chiropractors. So I would change, put on my suit, and I would go down there and sit in the waiting room with my briefcase of contracts, contingency agreements with the same suit, right, from high school with that same suit that Mark told me to take off. Yeah. And the chiropractor would come out, Mr. Cuban, what are you doing here? Mr. Cuban is one of our top trial lawyers. Mr. Cuban's never stepped in a courtroom. Mr. Cuban will get you maximum settlement for your case. Mr. Cuban will cut his fees, Mr. Cuban will do whatever it takes to settle your case without stepping in a courtroom. I was awful. And your listeners are probably wondering, how does this guy still have his license? Right. Or has it been suspended? It hasn't, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. And I say that tongue in cheek, but you open the back of any lawyer magazine, the bar journals, and it lists what we call the pages of shame. All the lawyers have been suspended, disbarred, reprimanded, and about 40 or 50% of those are going to be drug and alcohol related. So it's a real problem.
Well, the I used to do College World Series in Omaha every year, and there was a year, I guess early, I don't know, maybe 2013, 2014. One of the guys that came out there and also managed the event for us, managed one of the things I was doing on the outside with my staffing agency, and he had not drank in 10 hours. He ended up getting pulled over, passed the whole thing, and then they did the breathalyzer, blew .08. This is where the story becomes a legal story. So the lawyer that took him on, because he was not from Nebraska, he was from, I think, Missouri at the time. The lawyer goes, "I get these thrown out all the time. Nebraska turns out is a very lenient state on DWIs." All of a sudden, he couldn't get a hold of his lawyer. Turned out the lawyer was, although very good at fighting DUIs, also had 3 of them, and he got his 4th one, which therefore caused him to lose his license. All these different things. So all of his clients were like, "What? Just I paid $1,000. I don't know where he is." So it's interesting. I think a lot of us think that we make the lawyers even with the justice system, when in all reality they're not.
Well, here's a statistic for you from a study, a landmark study that came out about 5 years ago called the American Bar Association ABA Betty Ford Hazelton study.
Yeah.
Lawyers have an alcoholism rate at twice the general public.
Wow.
And for a lawyer under 10 years of practice, it's 1 in 3.
Well, I mean, again, it makes sense. You guys also, it's a profession that's either overly that you get too many thanks, or it's thankless, or sometimes you have to sell your soul to the devil, and
Yeah, I
there's
mean,
a wide range.
and you talked about jail. I was arrested in 1990 after my first divorce. Went to jail. Was arrested. I was speeding up the Dallas tollway, really close to my house. State trooper, not the Dallas police, state trooper pulls me over, and I'd been drinking. And you remember the Ginger Man down in the
Yeah.
quad?
Oh yeah.
I'd been drinking at the Ginger Man, drowning my divorce woes, and I just got pulled over. And I'm convinced, like any drunk, I'm convinced I'm not drunk, right? And are you going to take I'm going to show you I'm not drunk. I'm going to pass all the tests, and you're going to let me go, right? He's like, "Yeah, right, buddy." Yeah. So I'm missing my nose, and I can't count backwards, and click, steal, and takes me down to stare at Justice Center where the jail is, and I said, I'm going to show you even more, and I'm going to blow in the breathalyzer just to show you that I'm not 0.10, which it was back then. Now it's 0.08. Of course, I blew a 0.11, but I did plead not guilty, as was my right, and make the state prove their case. And one of my 9 lives in addiction, the day of trial, my lawyer, a guy named Rich Warfield, great guy, he comes out of the courtroom. I'm waiting in my suit, and he has a piece of paper. It's a dismissal. And he says, "Happy early birthday." "What happened, Rich?" "The state trooper didn't show up for your trial." The trooper, who was an elderly guy when he arrested me, now we're a couple years later when it goes to trial, he retired and moved back to wherever, Texas, and he wasn't coming back to testify against Brian Cuban. And so they had to dismiss the case. And I said, "Thank you, Rich." He says, "Don't thank me, thank them." And he points into the district attorney workroom where they're all huddled. And I opened the door and I said, "Thank you." They looked at me like they wanted to throw me off the building. He grabs me by the suit collar, pulls me back. Rich says, "Get out of here before they refile." I was kidding.
Man. Well, that's one time. You said how many? So you went through 3 marriages. And I want to make sure I get some of I want to make sure I get the good stuff in.
Yeah, well, in 2005,
yeah,
I became hopeless.
Yeah.
And loss of hope is a dangerous thing. And I decided to end my life by suicide. And I was very lucky. A friend of mine who I dedicated my first book to got a disturbing email from me, called my brothers. And Jeff was the first one into my house, and I had a .45 automatic on my nightstand, cocaine everywhere. There was Xanax scattered about. I was Xanaxing my way through the day and coking through the night, just day after day after day.
Yeah.
And Mark showed up. He flew in from LA, and they took me kicking and screaming on my first trip to Green Oaks Hospital. And kicking and screaming, they're trying to save my life, and I just want them to leave me alone. And they weren't able to put a hold on me like they wanted to, because I knew what to say. In Texas, you have to be a danger to yourself and others. So we did what I call the Cuban Rehab. They took my car keys, drove me back home, and said, "Stay in your house for 2 weeks and everything's going to be okay." And my family's no different. They're trying to figure it out. And my only thought was, well, no problem. My drug dealer delivers. And I brought the party to me.
Wow.
And then Of
For
course,
anybody watching right now, just a reminder, this will be up if you didn't catch the beginning, if you're jumping in. Just make sure you check out our podcast channel. It's hashtag BetheChange.com/podcast.
and
Yeah, go ahead.
and I know we want to get to good stuff, but it really got
You're good.
insane, quote unquote insane, in the summer of Mark put me to work for him, and I failed at that miserably. I was showing up at meetings drunk and coked up and hungover, repeating cycles, right? Just repeating
Yeah.
cycles. And in 2006, when the Mavericks were going to the NBA championship for the first time, I had the opportunity, and this was nearing the end, right? When my really rock bottom recovery tipping point. I had the opportunity to get great tickets, and I also got some tickets for friends. I didn't give them to my friends. I didn't sell them on eBay. I traded them to my drug dealer for $1,000 in cocaine. My dealer shows up at my house, Anthony. I hand him the tickets. He gives me the blow. I go running up to my home office, dump it out on my giant wooden desk, this cocaine mountain like I'm Scarface. I want to
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking.
Rub my nose in it. And I, of course, had to do something. I roll up this nasty dollar bill, line it out. And cocaine users are kind of an ironic bunch. You go to the bathroom, you wash your hands, pandemic times, you put on the hand sanitizer, but we'll stick a dollar bill up our nose has God knows what on it and used by God knows who, and shove it right up there. Go figure.
Right.
But we were really at the point where cocaine had long stopped giving me the feelings that I had achieved, and I was chasing the high. And there was also the paranoia. Do I hear the cops outside? Woo, woo, woo. I go peeking out the window. There's no one out there. But now I'm all paranoid. I hide the cocaine. I drive to a Lowe's where I buy electrical faceplate outlets, a drill, and a saw. I drive back to my house, and I go to the closets upstairs to the drywall with the drill and the saw, and I cut these fake electrical outlets in the closet drywall. And I put the cocaine in smaller Ziploc baggies and put it behind all these fake electrical outlets and slap it covers on, thinking I'm the smartest lawyer ever. Like the DEA, the cops, and the drug dogs have never thought of that before.
Yeah.
And so I do some more, and again, just pain and shame and paranoia. And it was never maybe you have a problem, Brian. It was maybe I need a new dealer. Maybe I need to change out the Grey Goose for the Jack Daniels. And the paranoia. An hour later, I go back to those same electrical outlets. I take the cocaine out. I put it back in the giant Ziploc baggie, and I flush it down the toilet in my master bedroom.
Oh, Jesus.
Now $900 worth of cocaine, right? Because I did something. The next morning comes. I wake up. Did I do that? Wait, did I? Yeah, I flushed my cocaine down the toilet. What the hell? There's another game tonight. Another call to my brother. 2 more tickets. Another call to my cocaine dealer. He shows up at my house and said, dude, you did all that last night? I didn't want to tell him I flushed it down the toilet. Yes, I did it all. Okay, here you go.
He's like, how are you alive?
Give him the tickets. Well, you know what? It was an 8-ball, and I knew people who did way more than me, but
yeah.
And 8 balls, 3.5 ounces of cocaine.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, the drug lingo.
Yeah.
But so rinse, wash, repeat. I dump it out on the desk one more time, right? Do some more, get paranoid again, go back to those same electrical outlets, hide it again, second night in a row.
Please tell me you didn't flush it again.
Take it back out again, go to that same bathroom, drop to my knees like I've done so many times, praying or hoping for someone or something to take away the pain and the shame, and flushed it down the toilet again. Second night in a row. They say when Dallas flushes, it runs downhill to Houston. So I think some people in Houston might have had a little hop in their steps those 2 nights.
Or in the runoff systems, you had some insects or critters, some frogs that were they were turned. They were lit.
Frogs were just pounding it out, frog humping those 2 nights. But the quote unquote insanity of addiction, doing something the same way over and over, expecting a different result. But we know addiction is not insane. It's a biological brain-based process that affects so many of us. I mean, Anthony, we lost 100,000 people to fatal opioid overdoses last year.
Yeah, big time.
It's a problem.
Yeah, it's beyond a problem.
And it was a problem for me until finally, after a 2-day alcohol-induced blackout, after partying all night. My now wife, my girlfriend at the time, was out of town and came home and found me, and she stood by me, thank God. And we've now been married over 5 years and been together over 15. But that was my second trip to the same psychiatric hospital. And standing in that parking lot, Anthony, this for the second time, a few things occurred to me. One, there wouldn't be a third trip. I'd be dead. Two, she was going to leave. She stood by me. And, I rebuilt the broken trust and found recovery. And three, I thought about something our father said to Mark, Jeff, and I growing up. Our father, who was a veteran of the Pacific, fought at Okinawa and Korea, old school, fixed cars, had a trim shop with his older brother for over 40 years. They put reupholstered seats and put convertible tops on cars. He said, in the middle of three boys like me, he said, guys, wherever you go in life, no matter what happens, pick up the phone, call your brother, tell your brother you love him. This was a gift he was giving us because it was the relationship he had with his two brothers.
Yeah.
And standing in that parking lot, I wasn't ready to lose my family because I wasn't losing their love, but they were frustrated, and families distance, right? They get frustrated and they distance. I wasn't seeing my nieces. I wasn't seeing my brother. I wasn't seeing my father. The only people I was hanging with were the people who loved me until the cocaine ran out.
Or the money. Yeah.
Yeah. And I decided that I just couldn't lose my family. And if you want to know how that gift stuck that my dad handed down to us, all these decades later, 1,200 miles from Pittsburgh, Mark, Jeff, and I lived walking distance to each other. And until my father passed away 3.5 years ago, he lived across the street from me. And that was the beginning, April 8th, 2007.
Wow. So you're saying your bottom was the drunken night being found by your now wife, right?
Yes. Why not 2005 when I was dry firing a gun in my mouth to practice? I don't know.
Well, everybody's got a different bottom.
Yeah, if we could figure out what they were, right, we'd have the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So you went and got help for the second time. Kind of your ties to your family allowed it to stick. When do you ever talk to other addicts and share your story?
All the time. I got sober in the rooms of 12-step. I do meetings. I still go. I do now virtual speaker meetings. I share my story with whoever wants to listen because I am not an expert in anything, right? Mm-hmm. I am not some recovery celebrity. I'm not this. I don't have anything to offer but my story.
Yeah.
And so I share that as much as I can because what change do I want to be? I want to instill hope for recovery. That's the change. Be the change. Because by doing that change can be just one moment of hope. And sometimes that is all it takes is that one split second of hope where someone says, I'm ready.
Yeah, and it's interesting. People think "be the change" is they take the Gandhi quote, they take it and they use it for their own purpose a lot, and they think that it's be the change. You got to go change what's going on in your neighborhood, change what's going on in your country, and yes, that's part of it. But be the change is very internal. In order to change the people around you, you have to learn how to change yourself.
There's a you may know this saying. It's kind of a Kabbalistic Jewish saying. It's called Tikkun Ulam.
What does it mean?
Changing the world with acts of kindness.
Yeah.
So that is what I try to do.
And I mean, being that we are in the what is today, the second night of Hanukkah, third,
or Sunday evening.
Yeah. So I mean, that is also about light and being the light around you and lighting up the world. And I think that
just try to change my little part of the world, right? With acts of kindness.
And we talked about this before the show, and we were chatting. What kind of message can we have to actually try to rid in this world? Is there a way to even rid addiction? Is there a way to rid all these things? Like, what kind of things can we make as a change?
Look. Let's be. We can help people who are struggling, and we should. And I mean, maybe who knows how science will evolve? Maybe someone will develop the magic addiction pill, right?
Yeah,
a quote unquote vaccine to addiction. But we have to be. We have to be real here. Human beings are emotion-driven character. We're emotion-driven beings. We feel pain. We feel shame, and so it is in my mind, and people may disagree with me. It is an evolutionary driven need to want to sometimes seek out ways that are to so we don't have to feel those things. So
Yeah.
we don't have to feel those things, and so people are going to seek them out. Can we try to close the curve and lessen reasons to seek them out? Should we? I think we should be telling stories about ways that we don't have to prop ourselves up with those substances, and there are ways to enjoy life without that. Sure, and that's what I try to do by storytelling.
And I think that's important. Again, sharing, like we said, that ripple effect, sharing the fact. I mean, people can look at you, be like, "Oh, he's got this incredibly rich brother. He had everything, and he just chose to piss things away."
I get that all the time. I get
And
that all the time.
and the thing behind it is nobody knows anybody's backstory. They don't know. People always forget about the hard work that Mark had. And let's be honest, the hard work you had, through alcohol addiction, you made it through law school. Like, fact is, you
Well,
didn't just skirt through
I
things.
don't want to be disingenuous and intellectually dishonest here. I have privilege, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I have skin color privilege. I have financial privilege. I have last name privilege. I enjoy multiple levels of privilege that the vast majority of this country does not enjoy. And so that doesn't mean I took advantage of it for recovery. I didn't. But I acknowledge that, and I try to use that privilege in a way to amplify my message that there is hope, that there can be change.
Yeah. Before we get to our final message for people and what you're working on, I know we had, I mean, the somewhat sad but also funny story of the tickets. Do you have any good, funny Mark Cuban brother stories that you want to share with the audience?
So we have that story. I'll tell you another funny story. My first lesson in philanthropy from Mark. So Mark was big in sales. He was selling Junior Achievement, and he was also big in helping to give back. So he asked me, and this was at 15, 16, 17 years old. He asked me if I wanted to go with him to sell candy, sugarless candy for the Guild for the Blind. And I might have been 12 or 13. So we're out selling, and this lady hands me, she goes, "I don't want the candy, but here's $10. I'm like, yes, I'm going to the amusement park. So I go running back to Mark, and I may even have been 11. I don't remember how young I was. And this was before Al Gore invented the internet. Unless you really knew people around, charity, and really, I didn't really have a good grasp of what philanthropy charity meant.
Right.
And so I go back to him holding the tent. I said, yes. He said, Brian, that is not your play money. That is a donation. That money goes to the Guild for the Blind. Put it in the bag because it buys people glasses. It buys people glasses. And that's what we were raising money for, to buy glasses.
Yeah.
So kind of my first lesson in philanthropy from Mark.
Oh, that's pretty funny. And
here's another funny. Yeah,
go for it. No, go for it. Yeah.
So 1999, we want to talk about how close Mark might not have come to owning the Mavs.
Okay.
1999, 98, 99, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the owner, Ed Marino, declares bankruptcy. Puts the Penguins into bankruptcy. So this was in the Mario Lemieux kind of, he had just left the team, and he had this huge stake because they owed him a lot of salary.
Yeah.
And so the Penguins are in real danger of being moved to Canada. So a buddy of mine from law school emails me. He says, hey, they're trying to put together a conglomerate team to buy the Mavs or buy the Penguins and keep them here in Pittsburgh. So this was the time where I'd send Mark off stuff all the time. I got not interested, because I'm not his deal broker, right?
Right.
People finally realized it. I've stopped getting those emails, but like I'm Mark's deal broker,
his gatekeeper.
Yeah, I'm not. Don't send them.
Yeah.
But in this one, I get an email back. He says, "Who do you know?" Oh. So before I knew it, I'm in Pittsburgh, and we're putting together this deal. And this was before 9/11, obviously. Yeah. So we're putting together this deal with Mario to buy the Penguins. Mark flies in. He goes, we drive out there. He makes me wait in an Einstein's Bagel Shop where he goes and meets with Mario. So, and this is before smartphones, so I'm twiddling my thumbs.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh, wow, he's going to buy the Penguins. I'm going to be general manager. Not really, but so we're driving back to our hotel in Pittsburgh, the Omni in Pittsburgh, and he's actually on the phone saying, hey, I need to get this money wired in. And it was, they had figured out a deal. And the next day he flew. I didn't hear from him. We had gone to the playoff game that night. And so this is before recovery for me. We'd done some drinking.
Right.
And I flew back to Dallas, didn't talk to him, and then I read in the paper 2 days later or so that he decided not to do the deal. I'm like, damn. But that is how close Mark came to buying the Penguins.
Which he would have never bought the Mavs.
Well, I don't know, but it worked out. But he bought the Mavericks in January of 2000. So April '99, January 2000.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Yeah. And Mark, I think, decided it just wasn't a good deal. It wasn't a good business deal. And so he said there were too many lawyers in the room, and he was right.
But and honestly, hockey ended up being a little bit tougher. I mean, I grew up in St. Louis, again, huge hockey town. But as a country, the NBA has just skyrocketed.
Well, look how it worked out, too. The Penguins under Mario got the team, got his salary back, recouped his salary, and ended up winning multiple Stanley Cups as the owner of the Penguins. Mark, the Mavs, ended up winning the NBA championship. So it worked out for Pittsburgh. It worked out for Dallas. My only real as a Pittsburgh, I bleed black and gold, Pittsburgh Pirates. And my only bummer is that Mark never bought the Pirates.
There was a deal a couple years back. I don't even know how many years ago. He was thinking about getting involved.
I think there might have been a window, but I don't know that he ever seriously had the opportunity. Now he was seriously in for the Cubs, but
is that what it was? Okay,
yeah, the Cubs,
which I would have hated. I'm a Cardinal fan.
Yeah, that didn't work out.
But the last thing, it's funny when you brought up Mark in the beginning, when he was finding a way to make those quick trades, with the newspapers or with the papers. I was at McGuire's 60-second home run. So now that I know that Mark did that, I feel like I'm in good company. So McGuire hit a 60-second home run to beat the record. They had all the magazines, the quick anything out that could be sold that day. I went and I bought it. I was out there and I was, what was that, 98? I was 16. My mom and my grandpa were at the game. I'm inside and I started doing deals. I managed to have one of everything that I wanted and an extra $40 by the end of the night because I was just buying a bunch of stuff. I stopped watching the rest of the
game. eBay was on fire.
Things were clicking, you know?
So, but I mean, it just shows you how Mark's developed. I mean, at 15, 16 years old, seeing opportunity, filling need.
Yeah. Well, I want to wrap it up with, obviously, again, what you've got going on, what your plans are for the future. I do have a question, and again, Wikipedia sucks, as we know. I forgot to bring this up beforehand. Do you still do some stuff? And I know your father was military. Do you still do stuff with? I think it was Fallen Patriot Fund.
The Fallen Patriot Fund. That was started by Mark back, and I want to say, early 2000, right around the Operation Iraqi Freedom, to help families of soldiers in Operation Iraqi Freedom killed or seriously wounded in combat. And obviously that ran its course. And so we don't do that anymore. But Mark is the site still exists, and it's more for first responders.
Excellent. Well, I love it. And so I'm going
to put over $5 million.
Totally fine. Wow. I'm also going to put up your book again. For those people that joined in the middle or joined in the end, explain the book that you've got, Ambulance Chaser, coming out.
Sure. My new novel comes out December 7th, but you can buy it now, early order, because I'm trying to make a bestseller list. And it's about a Pittsburgh personal injury lawyer accused of the murder of a high school classmate 30 years prior after her remains are discovered in a vacant lot. He is arrested, charged with their murder, and he flees, becomes a fugitive to find the one person who can prove his innocence and save the life of his son who has been abducted.
Love it. So what else do you have coming up? You've got the book. What else do you have?
I still speak. I do a lot of speaking, especially in the legal industry. I speak at law firms, and that obviously, as you might expect, took a hit during COVID, but that's starting to pop again for 2022. I do a lot of writing. I'm working on a sequel to The Ambulance Chaser, and I'm also working on a revision of The Addicted Lawyer with more stories and covering a few more different issues.
You've had a fascinating life. You've been through a lot. You've had a lot of ups and downs. If there's one thing that you can still achieve in the next 5 years, what would it be?
To give as many people hope as possible for recovery and a better life.
I dig it. We got the book out there. I really enjoyed talking to you. I want to thank you for the time. Do me a favor. I'm going to wrap up the show, and then I'll meet you in the backstage for 2 minutes and just thank you for it, if that's okay with you, Brian.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for being there and being here for this show. I'm going to pull you in back. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Changemakers. Again, if you feel as though what you do in life, what your job is, whatever it might be, isn't enough to create change in the world, this is the one time I'm going to yell at you. You are wrong. Everybody goes through different things and different stories, and somehow you can relate to people that Brian might not be able to relate to, or I might not be able to relate to. And that's what's great about America. It's great about just um, the culture we have with different stories and different people. So I'm going to check out what Scott just said. I saw he said it earlier. Chad Sabora TED Talk, a recovery expert as well. And I love stories like this that are full of bumps and bruises and twists and turns in life, because it shows that you can get out on the other end. It also shows money and privilege doesn't mean that you are going to have a perfect life. And a lot of people say, if I only had, if I only had, if I only had. You've got yourself, you've got your intuition, and you've got your passions in life. And I want you guys to remember that. So thank you for joining for Changemakers. Really quick, coming up later tonight, we are going to be talking. I didn't talk any of it during this show. We're going to have a quick show about the Great American Summit coming up. We've got Ryan Weaver, country singer, ex-Black Hawk helicopter pilot, Barb Allen, founder of American Snippets, and we're going to talk about the Great American Summit coming to Dallas January 7th and 8th. We've got huge speakers all the way from Nick Vujicic to Ian Smith to Ryan Weaver, all these people. It's going to be a great event. I will be talking about it then, so jump on in about a half hour and learn a little bit more about it. We'll put links up for then. But across the board, guys, have a great evening, and thank you so much for joining us with another episode of Changemakers. Have a good night.